Welcome back to the SportsMax Zone. Football now, a fresh start is on the horizon for the Jamaica national men's team as they prepare to face neighbours Cuba in the CONCACAF Nations League on Friday at the National Stadium in Kingston. Before I continue, I can tell you that within the last 15 minutes we have had Suriname defeating Guyana by 3-1 and El Salvador 4-1 over Montserrat in 2 Nations League matches this afternoon. Well, Steve McClaren, the well-travelled and respected former England head coach, will take charge of Jamaica's Reggae Boyz for the first time. Speaking at Thursday's pre-match press conference, McClaren explained that his first order of business will be to continue making the team hard to beat.
I'm quite a flexible, adaptable coach. I like the fundamentals, I like the basics. I like people knowing their jobs, doing their jobs, working hard, having good attitude, being hard to beat. I think that's the platform of all performances. If you're easy to beat and you're too stretched and you can't defend, you don't win football matches or not enough. So that is what the team have got. That's what they've developed over the last 2 years under the last coach. And I like that. I like that. Gives us a platform. We need to build from that platform now.
McClaren also emphasised that development will be the key to success going forward.
Tomorrow focus on the performance. And it won't be perfect. I know that. Over 90 minutes it won't be. There'll be ups and downs and good spells, bad spells. But I want to see just some of the things that we've worked on. That the players are taking that on board and the team is developing in that, but also keeping the structure which they've had for the last 2 years and just help them develop from that. Because I think if you want to compete, you want to stay number 1 in the Caribbean, you want to get in the top 3 of the CONCACAF rankings, then you have to develop your game. And you know, we've worked with the players, we've talked with the players, how do we develop? So tomorrow is the first step. And it's a big step, one in which we need to find a way to win, but also show signs of the performance which we've worked on.
And as McClaren gets ready to take charge of the Reggae Boyz for his debut match on Friday, captain of the team, Andre Blake, spoke on the transition from former head coach Hamer Hallgrimsson to McClaren.
Hamer came in and he did a good job. You know, he definitely take us to another level. You know, but you know, things happen. You know, and when it was Steve time, you know, obviously, who didn't know him had to do their research. You know, but immediately we realized that we were getting somebody with a great pedigree. You know, so everybody was excited, as I said before, and we're all looking forward to it. And you know, now that we got a chance to meet and work together, you know, we're just excited. You know, it's great things to come.
Yeah, so with us to preview the game and give a bit of insight into what to expect from Steve McClaren, the Steve McClaren coach team, is our football analyst Lige Williams. Lige, Cuba have fallen down the pecking order in regional and CONCACAF football in the past decade or so. Maybe not such a difficult assignment, first assignment for Steve McClaren, or should we not say that?
Yeah, I don't think you can ever say that when it comes down to these CONCACAF clashes. I do think that I agree that Cuba aren't looking the brightest that they've looked in their history. You know, Cuba are a team that have represented the Caribbean at a major tournament before. They're a pretty accomplished team, but it is, at the same time, they have 7 players from their squad that will be facing Jamaica that represented them in the Under-20 CONCACAF Championship over the summer. So it is a pretty young team, a team in transition, and I do think that Jamaica should feel pretty confident in getting over the line, albeit it's Steve McClaren's first game.
Yeah, and as far as you sit, Lige, looking at his job here and his likely approach, and you're having your pulse on the team's preparation, are we likely to see anything different philosophically or strategically from the Reggae Boyz from what we had seen with Hallgrimsson in the past?
Yeah, I think if I'm going to answer that question, well, I think it would be good to look at, you know, who Steve McClaren is, what he stands for when he started coaching, who he's coached under, because he's had some pretty successful stints as an assistant manager as well as being a head coach. So I prepared a couple of graphics as per usual, I'd like to first look at his CV, where he's managed, so the people can get an idea of how successful he has been. Because when you look at it, even Andre Blake himself mentioned that some members of the Jamaican team weren't too sure who he was, but once they did the research, and this is part of the research, he was Alex Ferguson's assistant when Manchester United won that famous treble in 1999, went on to Middlesbrough, where he brought Middlesbrough their first trophy in their history. So, he went from Middlesbrough. Some of those reigns that I would say would be successful would be that Middlesbrough one, and at 20 where he won the Eredivisie as well. England, not so much. I guess that's where his career got a tad bit tainted, because in the early 2000s he was looked at as one of the most promising coaches in the world. But after that, he has had a couple of good reigns, probably at Derby County as well, where he brought them to the Championship playoff final. And if we were to look at now his, what he has accomplished in his career, I don't think it's anything to scoff at all. Because when you look at it, I think if you're just looking at accomplishments, looking at the profile of a manager, I don't think it would be too far stretched to say that Steve McClaren would be the highest profile coach in Jamaica's history. So the English League Cup with Middlesbrough, as I mentioned, that's Middlesbrough's first ever title, brought them to the UEFA Cup final at the time. Won the Eredivisie with 20, which is their first and only Eredivisie title, beating Martin Newell's Ajax in 2010. So he's an accomplished coach, and most recently he was a part of a Manchester United setup which has won 2 trophies in the last 2 years. And maybe a lot of people would attribute Manchester United recently with not a lot of success, but he has been a part of one of their most trophy-wise successful managerial regimes since Alex Ferguson has left. So I think Steve McClaren is a very accomplished coach. When it comes down to what he would like to do from a setup point of view, I mean, he's an English coach from the 90s after all. So, and you can hear from his press conference that he likes to keep things simple. He likes to focus on the fundamentals. Yeah. But one thing that he has been heralded with throughout his career is the harmony that he brings to dressing rooms. There was an article speaking on it when he went to QPR and when they just got relegated from the Premier League the first time, and they were in a lot of disarray because of all of the money that they spent and it wasn't going well. Yeah. And Steve McClaren came in and he did a really good job there. Obviously, I mentioned 20 before, a not-so-heralded team that came along and won the Eredivisie ahead of all of the favourites. So I think that Steve McClaren usually does a good job of bringing a squad together. You can see a couple clips of it here. I'm not saying that Jaime Hal Grimson had the squad in disarray or anything like that, but I do think that McClaren can bring some, a positive pulse to the team, and hopefully he can bring a positive pulse on the pitch as well.
And I just want to even draw on a very recent example of him, taking up his phone, calling Leon Bailey and, working through that. I know all the credit does not just go to him, but it's a perfect example of what you're talking about. Even today at the press conference, Liz, I asked him, how disappointed are you because you went through that, you got Leon on the team. It's so unfortunate that Leon picked up that injury, and he was quick to tell me, well, I spoke to him this morning and, he's telling me that he's working through it. It's nothing to be too worried about. He should join us very soon. So again, it speaks to that same point you're making about him, being that person that sort of brings harmony to a dressing room. And I can say, just the way he started already, Liz, I can agree with what you're saying. Now, the second question that I have for you is that aren't you worried that, coach comes with all this on his CV, right? But he didn't get enough time with the team ahead of this match. And that's one thing Cuba can feel a bit good about, that, they have a new coach. He's Steve McClaren. He comes with all these accomplishments, but he didn't really get to spend too much time with the boys just yet.
Well, I'm not going to say I'm worried about it because, well, it's a double-edged sword for me. Reason being because I'm not worried about it because good coaches can make an imprint on their team almost immediately. Especially when we speak about Steve McClaren, he said to focus on the fundamentals, focus on the simple things of the game. But with that being said, he was just a part of a coaching staff that, if you look at it, that team, being Manchester United, hasn't looked the best when it comes down to their setup in comparison to the rest of the Premier League. Now this is international management. And, with all the positives that are listed for Steve McClaren and what he has accomplished in the game, I do think that he does have his faults. He managed internationally before with England, and he was responsible for England not going to the Euros in 2008 as well and got fired from the job. The second shortest reign of an England boss in history. So I'm not saying that it's all roses and dandelions, but I'm going to give it time. I'm not going to just come here and be critical of the appointment so far. I'm going to wait and watch and see what happens on the field, because at the end of the day, as an analyst, that's what I focus on most.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you touched on that point. That failed Euro 2008 qualifying campaign for Steve McClaren. And I wanted to put the question to you, Lige, given where Steve McClaren is at this stage of his managerial career and where the Reggae Boyz are at this stage of their development, would you say the Reggae Boyz need Steve McClaren more than Steve McClaren needs the Reggae Boyz? Or is it the other way around, where Steve McClaren needs the Reggae Boyz more than the Reggae Boyz need him?
I wouldn't be compelled to say that Steve McClaren needs the Reggae Boyz.
How about a national team with potential?
I mean, the thing is, when it comes down to these scenarios, where he is in his career, when it comes down to older players, older managers, I don't think it's a case where their reputation can get any more damaged, in my opinion. I think,
but yes,
it can be enhanced, yes. So maybe he can go forward in some people's eyes, but I think for the mainstream, especially the British media, I don't see Steve McClaren, even if he takes Jamaica to the World Cup, being heralded as anything more than what they see him as currently, because he failed several times in that country, so it's hard to wipe off that reputation, but he has also had some success. So I think where he's rated currently will be ultimately where he goes down, despite what he does with Jamaica.
Yeah. Should Jamaicans and lovers of Jamaican football, should any at all be concerned, given, I mean, when you went through, for example, his CV and where he's had head coaching jobs, you're looking at club teams, and mostly in England, I think. This is only a second international appointment, if you want to put it like that. And you could well say that his first time failed with England. Given all of that, should Jamaicans be any at all concerned about whether he is capable of getting the job done at this level?
I think the smart thing to do is to watch, especially the first couple of games, and see. I don't have an issue with anyone being a bit concerned. It's a 60-plus-year-old coach coming into a team that is trying to push forward. It's a coach that hasn't been a head coach since, for over 5 years now. So it's very reasonable to be concerned. But in my opinion, as I said, you have to watch what you see on the field. And over the past couple of weeks, I've been watching a lot of his older teams. I've watched matches from his England team, his 20 team, his Derby team, which I think was his last and probably his most exciting team as well, the top scorers in the championship that year. And when you look at how McClaren plays, he typically favors a 4-3-3 or 4-4-2. As I said, when I said that he's an English manager from the 90s, I meant that not necessarily in a bad way, but he's a very simple coach. He doesn't really focus on changing systems out of possession, in possession. I think it's more the fundamentals of the game that he focuses on. But with that being said, he's coached under what many people see as a progressive coach for the last couple of years. Whatever you feel about Erik ten Hag, he is a coach that has shown some progression in his style of play over the years, especially before Manchester United. So if he has taken some things from Erik ten Hag and is going to bring it into this current system, this current Jamaica system, I think Jamaican fans should be a little bit excited, because Jamaica has a style of player that I think would match up pretty well with that style of play, that being a lot of transitional football, although Steve McClaren said he wanted more control in the press conference, but more transitional football, a lot of counter-pressing, and then a lot of calmness around the back as well. So I think there are things to take from Steve McClaren that you can be positive about, but I wouldn't be opposed to anyone being not so confident going into these games.
Yeah, Lige, I want to ask you a question quickly, because since he has taken this job, he has referenced the fact that as a FIFA technical person, he had done some work in this confederation before and was not completely new to the Reggae Boyz. But do you see his general unfamiliarity with CONCACAF football and how competitive football is played in CONCACAF as a Europe and UK-based coach. Do you see that as a hurdle that he'll have to climb?
Yeah, I think so, because that's a hurdle that Jaime Hal-Grimson had to climb himself as well. I think what he stands for as a coach can align well with Jamaica in some aspects, but at the same time, he'll have to come out and, you know, give his players that aggression, give them that fire to really compete against these teams. But I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue, in my opinion, especially because of how the squad is made up. When you think about how he spoke about Jamal Lowe, for example, in the press conference, and Jamal Lowe is a player because of Steve McClaren's, you know, he's an English manager. He has been in around, especially in the championship and the lower tiers for quite some time, the past decade. He knows a lot of these players pretty well. John Russell coming into the squad, Jamal Lowe, Ethan Pinnock, all of these players are not just players from Premier League academies the whole time.
Yeah.
They have been in and around that EFL system. So McClaren is familiar with a lot of them, and I do think that he can get the best out of them as well.
Yeah, but more directly, he's familiar with the players he will be coaching,
Yeah.
but the opposition that he'll face. And as I ask that, can I ask you what specifically in your mind would be the difference between competitive football in CONCACAF as opposed to what he experiences in UK, and the kind of adjustments you'd have to make?
I think it's a bit, I'm not going to say quicker, but it's definitely more physical. I do think that, you know, coincidentally, he has coached a lot of club football, and the reason why I brought up the championship is because in those lower leagues, it's actually much more similar to what we would see in CONCACAF, that being League One, League Two, the championship, as opposed to what we see in the Premier League on a week-by-week basis. In the Premier League, it's a much more fast-paced game and, you know, much more fluid. In the championship, you know, that's a league where it typically gets a reputation of a rough one. Yeah. So I think especially, and he said it himself today as well, that he can't wait to go to Honduras after this Cuba game, because those are the atmospheres that really drives him on. So I think that he's raring to go for the challenge, if we were to believe the words that he's saying. And I don't think the adjustment period will be too much for him, especially from that physical side of the game. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see how he adjusts tactically, though.
Yeah, okay. We're going to leave it there, Liz, but usually our team would ask you for a prediction for a match, and the match is Friday. What's your scoreline?
I think Jamaica will win this one pretty comfortably. As I said, the Cuba team are a pretty young one. So I'm predicting a multi-goal win, 3 or more goals to nil.
Oh, to nil, wow.
All right, thanks, Liz. A reminder that you can catch CONCACAF Nations League action, including Jamaica against Cuba, on your home of champions. And here's a list of the matches scheduled for Friday. French Guiana against Nicaragua, Jamaica at home to Cuba, Grenada traveling to St. Martin, that's Prince St. Martin, and Honduras at home to Trinidad and Tobago, 2 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and at 9 p.m. Those are the start times. Matches on SportsMax and SportsMax 2 as well. We go to break. We'll have more on the SportsMax Zone, including At the Track, coming up soon.